Hello, my name is Brandon DuBose, and I'm going to present my formal presentation regarding airlines and health passports. So, learning outcome number one is for aeronautical science, and the student will show evidence of advanced concepts of aviation, aerospace, and aeronautics to solve problems commonly found in their respective industries. So, the airline industry is a significant contributor to overall world GDP. Without the airlines, we don't have mass travel around the globe. And with travel comes tourism and business travel, and all of that contributes to local economies and local commerce. So it's vital that we are able to slingshot the recovery and the revenue generation of the airline industry. In order to do that, we must have some sort of international uniformity on how we're going to accomplish that. I attempted to address some of these concerns within my paper and to outline the scope of just how important the airline industry is to, the world. So it's important that we are all on the same page in the international community to promote international travel on the airlines. In this picture, this is my son aboard a KC-46 in 2020. He loves going out on the aircraft with me. All right, so learning outcome 2, aviation, legislation, and law. The student will show evidence of the basic concepts in national and international legislation and law as they pertain to the aviation, aerospace, and aeronautics industries. So, some of the most pertinent laws and acts and legislation brought forth that are relevant to my paper are all of the stimulus packages, the CARES Act, and whatnot. These were attempts to essentially throw a lifeline to the airline industry, and not just domestically, but globally. It affected the airline industry around the world. It's so that they can live to fight another day with the incredible shutdown that affected them due to COVID-19. There's over 2 decades of year-over-year growth in the airline industry, and then it plummeted for 2020 and 2021. 2021's, growing again, but we still haven't reached 3/4 of what the 2019 numbers were for overall passenger travel. So, to address this and the idea of vaccine mandates in order to travel, because it's in the airline industry's best interest to promote what makes people feel safe to travel. To do that, in general, people feel safer traveling aboard an aircraft in close proximity to others that are vaccinated against COVID-19. So it is a highly debated topic on whether or not the vaccination for COVID-19 should be required for domestic and or international travel. As of right now, there's constitutional precedent in the 1905 case of Jacobson versus Michigan, allowing for state vaccination mandates, but not federal vaccination mandates, because that directly affects interstate commerce, which is addressed in the Constitution as not being allowed to be affected by the federal government. So we have international and domestic legislation that is attempting to include health passport type mandates, particularly for international travel. In Israel, they have already integrated a health passport just for the daily living of individuals, for them to do anything within a social setting. For international air travel, right now, there is talks of integrating it in order for the international community to be on the same page, because it is within the right of a country to mandate that people traveling into the country must be vaccinated against whatever virus or disease they deem necessary for the safety of the citizens of that country. This is a photo that I took from inside the flight deck of a KC-46 while we were receiving fuel from another KC-46 while flying in a boundary layer. I just thought this was a cool picture. So, learning outcome 3, aviation safety. The student will show evidence of basic concepts in aviation safety as they pertain to aviation, aerospace, and the aeronautics industry. So safety is a passion of mine, especially as it relates to aviation. So as of now, the airline industry has pretty uniformly required that the passengers of aircraft wear masks, and in a lot of cases they're requiring that the middle seats be empty. And I'm not sure how much of the middle seats being empty is due to the lack of people wanting to fill the seats, or a legitimate safety measure, which is why I really only briefly mentioned it in the paper. I'm sure that if there was a demand for those seats to be filled, that the airlines would find a way to fill them. However, due to the development of the UV wand that has been being utilized by several airlines, it's possible to quickly sanitize an entire aircraft utilizing UV light that will kill the COVID-19 virus. And thankfully, due to the nature of aircraft design, about 60% of aircraft air is brought in and circulated at a pretty quick rate. And then the air that is actually filtered goes through HEPA filters that is capable of filtering out the COVID-19 virus and the particulates associated with them. In addition to, the air aboard an aircraft is relatively dry, meaning that the aerosol droplets are unable to latch onto other aerosol droplets, meaning the aerosol droplets coming from someone's mouth containing the virus have a lack of other aerosol droplets in the air to latch onto and exist on surfaces in order to transmit to other people. So the inherent design of aircraft promotes safety from viruses. And I was lucky enough to be a part of some testing where we were doing aeromedical evacuations for COVID-19 positive patients. And we were testing the effectiveness of our smoke barriers and essentially isolating the flight deck from the patients in the back of the jet. And it was quite an interesting experiment and was actually found to be fairly effective at stopping virus transmission just due to the inherent design of the aircraft. I didn't talk about my personal experiences in the paper, but my personal experiences backed up what I was able to find and cite within my paper. And in this photo, this was a young airman that I was able to bring on a flight with me for his first TDY, and it caught him off guard. He was just tickled to go, and I was excited that I was able to make it happen for him. So, learning outcome 4. The student will show evidence of sound, ethical management principles within standard aviation, aerospace, and aeronautics operations. So, airlines have legal obligations and moral obligations. Their legal obligations Well, they're required to follow the law. The law set in the international community, as well as whatever state they are landing in within the United States. So, with that comes the balance of moral obligations. The moral obligations airlines have is to maintain passenger safety. It's in their best interest to maintain passenger safety. But when the moral obligations conflict with the legal obligations, there can be quite the amount of controversy, such as with health passports. Airlines face a need to make passengers feel safe, and they feel a way to do that is to require some form of health passport. But legally, at least in the United States, they cannot do that for the purposes of interstate commerce and travel. And then the management of policy, it becomes, when policy is changing quickly and rapidly, it's important for any given airline to have effective communication with its people and to clearly outline standards and expectations for their employees as well as their passengers. Having readily available data is vital in order to promote the latest safety measures and ethical guidelines that are being outlined by a given airline. Then you have employee considerations. I didn't dive into it too much in the paper, but it is within the legal right of an airline to require the employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19 or any other virus that they deem necessary. And at first, I was under the impression that this might be a violation of equal opportunity rights, but it's not. Simply because as long as the airline industry is accepting of reasonable accommodations, then as far as like religious or health exemptions, then they are perfectly within their right to do so. However, they are, depending on the state and country, not legally allowed to impose that their passengers be vaccinated. Particularly Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. He has banned any business from requiring a proof of vaccination in order to be served by that business. And that goes back into the management of policy, where the policy must fit within the legal obligations as well as the moral obligations of a given business. All of it ties in together, and I did my best to outline the grand scope of what the airline industry is facing in today's harsh challenges. All right. My SWOT analysis. I feel that my paper had a lot of room for improvement. However, I do feel that some strengths. I was data oriented. I had some strong illustrations, good background information, and I feel that I had a pretty relevant topic to today's airline industry. My weaknesses. I failed to adhere to the capstone template. I was redundant in some areas. Some of my data should have been better corroborated from multiple sources. I did not make it clear when some data was being interpreted / inferred by myself, particularly when I stated that there is no proof of the long-term effects of the vaccine. I was making an inference based on the fact that the vaccine has only been out by a year, compared to most vaccines are studied for upwards of a decade before they are ever even FDA approved. I did not go into that detail, and I I had meant to, I just didn't. And I failed to include an entire section of the paper, the recommendations section. That's a pretty huge failure on my part. My opportunities. I had an opportunity to clarify rules and innovations that airlines have introduced, clarify that health passports are not yet required but being highly debated in the US and around the world. That was pretty much the premise of my whole paper. But in one area, I had not made it clear that it was simply a debated topic, but no airlines were requiring it yet. I could improve the conclusion to better tie into key points of the paper and integrate a recommendation section. And I could have included personal experiences with my air medical evacuations performed on the KC-46. I avoided doing that in the first place due to I didn't want my personal experience to be anecdotal evidence in order to support my point. I wanted to go based off of some other cited studies instead of citing myself. But I do feel that maybe that could have added an element to the paper that I was lacking, a personal element. Some of my threats was I did not properly cite direct quotes, and so the conversion from my pages document on my MacBook to a PDF and then uploading to Canvas, it seemed that some of my formatting was altered. In the review that I received, some spacing was cited as being incorrect, yet when I went back to my actual document, everything appeared to be correct. So I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I usually don't have a problem converting to a PDF and then uploading. I had several unintentional word-for-word instances. The only thing I can attribute that to is I read it and went back to type it after having my trains of thought interrupted, and I ended up typing it pretty much word for word. I never directly, well, I'm going to say never. I believe in one or two cases I did directly copy and paste and then still cited those direct quotes wrong. But I had several completely unintentional word for word instances. My family and home life concerns, as we have discussed, you know about those. I had difficulty maintaining consistent trains of thought due to working while taking care of my wife and kids. That's supposed to say wife, but I did have a pretty significant amount of trouble going back and forth and trying to write this paper while, going through the process of getting my kids to bed and working long days, coming home to take care of my wife, putting my kids to bed, and then at my bedtime, I'm able to, sit down and attribute a few hours to the paper. Over the course of weeks and weeks, it has seemed like it's been difficult to maintain consistent trains of thought. I feel that I probably could have mitigated that better by sticking to my outline a little more, or whenever I decided to go down a different route, writing down keywords and concepts to get myself back on track after having to step away. That was a learning experience for myself. And then I traveled in and out of the country several times. I was TDY constantly toward the beginning of this class, especially during our time when we were helping out getting the refugees out of Afghanistan. We were going back and forth across the pond a lot to refuel aircraft and get them home. So I had a lot going on, but I did my best. I really, really did. However, my own analysis was my overall paper had a lot of potential, but it failed to meet my personal expectations and, in general, the capstone requirements. I failed to reference the correct template and keep updated with announcements. The premise of the paper is relevant to the challenges faced by the airline industry today. It provides insightful background information and relevant data through redundancy, or though redundancy was a problem. Clarification should have been made in some areas, and citations should have been more carefully integrated. My paper has a lot of room for improvement, and I feel that my efforts failed to meet course expectations and my personal expectations. I'm proud that I completed the paper, but I am quite frankly not very pleased with the overall results of my paper. But I'm finally done. This was a photo that was taken after we flew over the White House and escorted the Blue Angels. Um, we picked them up in, like, I think South Dakota, and then we refueled them to fly all the way across the country. We flew over the White House together, and then we refueled them a few more times to take them home to Pensacola, Florida. And that's me. And over there on the far left was my wing commander at the time. He was the one that, well, I asked him if I could fly with him that day and bring my new airman with me, and he made it happen. So I appreciate everything that you have done for me, sir, and I will forever be grateful for the opportunities that you have afforded me for this class, and I will carry that forward with me from here on out. So, thank you.